In March 2025, a private charter flight from Miami to Los Angeles disappeared from radar mid-flight. What made this case terrifying wasn't just the disappearance, but the chilling messages passengers sent moments before. Several texts and voicemails described a shadowy figure moving through the cabin, even though no such person was recorded on the boarding manifest. When authorities finally located the plane's wreckage in the Nevada desert, they found all passengers missing, except for the pilot, who was discovered alive but in a catatonic state. He was repeatedly muttering one phrase, "It wasn't meant to be seen." Investigators were baffled. The black box recording contained bizarre static distortions and occasional gasps from the passengers, but no distress call from the pilot. Further analysis revealed something even stranger. Passenger seats were still buckled, but the people had vanished as if they had been taken mid-flight. A few months later, a hiker in the Nevada desert found a torn airline ticket with the name of one of the missing passengers, but no footprints or other signs of human activity in the area. A newlywed couple moved into a historic home in Savannah, Georgia, only to experience unexplainable phenomena. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut violently, and every night at 3:14 a.m., the house let out a horrifying, ear-piercing scream. Neighbors confirmed they had heard the sound for years. Paranormal investigators discovered that, in the early 1900s, the house had been a secret asylum for the criminally insane. One patient, a woman known only as Ms. Grayson, was said to have let out an inhuman scream the night before she vanished. The couple fled the house after just 3 months, and to this day, it remains abandoned. More unsettling discoveries followed when the couple's lawyer investigated the property's history. Old blueprints revealed a hidden basement, completely sealed off. When a team attempted to open it, they were met with violent electrical surges and unexplained injuries. One worker reportedly saw a pale woman's face staring at him before he collapsed from a seizure. The city eventually ordered the house to be condemned, but residents still report hearing the scream, growing louder each year. A college student named Daniel shared his dorm room with a full-length mirror left behind by a previous tenant. One night he noticed his reflection didn't move in sync with him. Thinking it was his imagination, he ignored it, until he saw his reflection smile, even though he hadn't. Frightened, he covered the mirror with a sheet, but every morning the sheet was found crumpled on the floor. One night he woke up to heavy breathing coming from the mirror. He smashed it with a chair, but instead of shattering, the glass seemed to absorb the impact. The next day, Daniel transferred to a different dorm. His old roommate, who took over the room, mysteriously disappeared a week later. Campus security later found a video recording of Daniel's last night in the room. In it, he could be seen sleeping peacefully, until his reflection in the mirror stood up on its own, walked toward him, and leaned over his bed. The footage ended abruptly, but Daniel swears that he dreams of that reflection every night. A rideshare driver in Chicago picked up a woman at midnight who asked to be taken to a cemetery. During the drive, she remained silent, her face pale and eyes unblinking. When he reached the cemetery, she handed him a $20 bill and stepped out. The driver looked in the rear-view mirror and saw her disappear into thin air. Shaking, he checked the money she had given him. The bill was old, dating back to the 1800s, and the serial number didn't exist in any records. That night, he developed a high fever and suffered from nightmares of the same woman staring at him from his backseat. A week later, he received an envelope in the mail containing the same $20 bill, now torn in half with the words, "You took me home," written in red ink. To this day, he refuses to pick up passengers at night. Deep in the heart of Norway lies a dense, untouched forest that few dare to enter. Locals whisper about strange occurrences, eerie voices, and people who vanish without a trace. The stories are always the same. Those who step too far inside never return. Despite these warnings, a group of 5 friends, Eric, Lisa, Anders, Mikkel, and Sophia, decided to hike into the Forbidden Woods in early April 2025. They were experienced hikers and laughed off the local legends as mere superstition. Armed with camping gear and flashlights, they ventured in, eager for adventure. As the sun began to set, an uneasy feeling settled over the group. The deeper they went, the quieter the forest became. Birds no longer chirped, and even the wind seemed to vanish, replaced by an unsettling stillness. Then the whispers began. At first they were faint, like a distant conversation just out of earshot. The hikers stopped, scanning their surroundings. "Did you hear that?" Sophia whispered. Lise nodded, hugging herself. "It's probably the wind." But it wasn't. As they continued, the whispers grew louder. It was an ancient, guttural language none of them recognized. Shadows seemed to flicker between the trees, and an unshakable sense of being watched crept over them. Fear set in. "Maybe we should turn back," Mikkel suggested, his voice tight with unease. Just as they decided to retrace their steps, Eric suddenly froze. His entire body went rigid. His breathing became shallow. Then, without warning, he spoke. But it wasn't his voice. The sound that came from Eric's mouth was deep, layered, almost inhuman. He spoke in the same eerie language that had been whispered around them. His eyes, once bright blue, turned completely black. His lips twisted into a grin that did not belong to him. The others screamed. Sophia grabbed Eric's arm, shaking him. "Stop it! Eric, snap out of it!" But Eric didn't respond. He turned his head slowly, his eyes lifeless, and muttered a final phrase before collapsing to the ground. Panic took over. The group ran, their flashlights bouncing wildly as they sprinted through the trees, leaving Eric behind. When they finally reached the edge of the forest, they collapsed in exhaustion. Desperate, they called the authorities, who immediately organized a search team. But Eric was gone. The only trace left behind was his backpack, found neatly placed beside a moss-covered tree, and a small notebook inside it. The pages were filled with symbols and phrases written in an unknown script. Experts later analyzed the writings and discovered eerie similarities to carvings found in a Viking burial site miles away. Some believe Eric was taken by something ancient, something that had been waiting for centuries. To this day, no one ventures into the forest after sunset, and those who do never come back.